No, I don't have an intro written, but I'm not worried about it. I'm gonna kind of just rely on my wit and charm to get me through it. Okay. This is Gùgōng from Tasty Minstrel Games. Essentially, it is a worker placement game that you play over the course of 4 rounds, and the player with the most points at the end of the game wins. Tale as old as time. We've heard it before. Each player starts the game with 4 cards. Now these cards are your workers, more or less. However, unlike most worker placement games, you don't just place a worker and take the action. Using the cards that you get at the start of the game, you have to trade with cards that are already seated onto the board. And when you trade these cards, you have to trade down. So you have to play a card that is higher than the card that's already on the board. Now what that means is you could play a card and then the next player could take your card that's on the board and take that action as well. Every card that you pick up from the board or that you have to discard into your hand, out of your hand, becomes the cards that you play for the next round. And because there's so much going on here, I want to go over each individual space and give my thought on the game as a whole, just as I go along. There's a lot to go on with this board. And let's first, as a whole, take a look at the board. There are 2 things about this that really strike me. One is that it's beautifully illustrated. It is a very nice looking board. And 2 is that it is incredibly busy. I really only like one of those things. And you can guess which. Right off the bat, at the top here, you've got your travel action. This whole portion of the board is the travel action. And every time that you trade a card out of space, you take the action there, as well as take any bonus action that may be included on the card that you've placed there. But anyway, if you do trade for a card in this spot, you move your horse to any available spot that connects to that space. You take the token on that spot, which gives you an immediate bonus or action, then add the token to the top of your player board. The tokens, however, have a ton of iconography. It isn't just that the icons are completely confusing, anything like that, but most of them take an understanding of the rules to be able to grasp them fully. You won't be able to know the first time or even the second time you're playing this what every one of these tokens is going to mean. I like this spot because it gives you an opportunity to advance yourself elsewhere on the board, and it adds a currency that you can use to do the same. But I'll get to the currency in a little bit. Look, the Jade market is essentially just points. The more you have, the more points you get. So when you play here, you can buy Jade. The sooner you play here, the cheaper the Jade is. The points ramp up real quick though. When I played it, it was easily the least interesting bit of the game, but it opened up options for people to get points quickly if they decided to shift from the flashier actions and move on to the Jade. It's one of a large number of point scoring opportunities, which is great, but it's also the most boring. The Palace of Heavenly Purity is the center of the board. Here you're racing to the top to meet the Emperor. The faster you get there, the more points you earn. In addition, if you choose to ignore this, you're going to lose because making it to the top of this track is a requirement. I love the little bit of tension this adds. It's not a difficult task to get to the top, but you've really only got 4 rounds to do everything you want to do and make sure you get your little man to the top. The decree action lets you claim one of the 6 randomly chosen decree bonuses. Some of them can earn you massive points, while others will give you a great amount of assistance in the game. The way they work rewards you for being the first to adopt one of the decrees and makes it more expensive to earn a reward that's already been taken. And this is where the fact that this game is a game of timing really comes into play here. It's something that I really enjoy about thinkier games, is the fact that there's a ton of right actions that you can take, but they can be taken in the wrong order. They can be taken at the wrong time, which can be detrimental to your game. So getting in early on these is a great idea most of the time, but you have to see how the board's been seated and judge based on what your opponents have done as well. The intrigue action. The intrigue track is both a currency and a tiebreaker. If you are further on this track than your opponent and it comes down to a tie, you're going to win. Taking this action allows you to move further up this track, and if you're the first person to take that action, you become the first player for the following round. Again, this one's a little on the boring side in terms of the whole of the game, but it's an important bit to keep an eye on. If you know it's going to be close, then this might be your lifesaver. Also, the further on here, the better bonus you can get when the Great Wall triggers. And what I mean by that is basically when the Great Wall action triggers, wherever you're at on this track, you can spend your placement to purchase bonuses. The Great Wall. Now, choosing this space allows you to place a worker on the wall. Once an amount of workers determined by the player count is on the wall, it scores. The player with the most workers on the wall removes their workers and earns a bonus. In addition, anyone on the wall when it scores has the option of spending those spots on the intrigue track that I talked about before for bonuses. While this action itself isn't terribly interesting either, it's the addition with the ability to sell intrigue points that makes it so valuable. You may not be interested in spending workers on the wall, but if you can even toss one up there, you're going to get to spend those intrigue points. The Grand Canal. When you play here, you can place a worker on an existing boat, or place a new boat, or you can move one of your boats further down the river. If you have 3 workers, you can cash it in for a reward based on the port you're currently docked at. The rewards can make a huge difference in the game. Moving on to the player boards, every player gets one of these boards. And off to the side here is a list of bonuses that you can earn from that Grand Canal action. And when you take them, you take a worker, just to indicate that you have taken that specific bonus action. And certain actions can only be taken a certain amount of times. You could potentially earn additional points. You can take your double worker, which works as a single worker except does double the amount of damage pretty much wherever you place it. Or you can get a new card, an additional card from the deck, which gives you an extra action. In addition to that, as I mentioned before, the travel tokens go in this slot up here and also become a currency that you can change in at any time for a bonus of extra workers, points, or potentially jade. And this is a huge plus with this game, is just how clear and concise this player board is. It's got references, it has physical slots for everything that you would potentially need to place, even a space for your worker pool and your cards that you're going to be discarding and using the following rounds. Look, if you haven't gathered my thoughts on this yet, essentially Gùgōng is a game that is greater than the sum of all of its parts, meaning each individual and specific choice that you make in the game, every action on its own is not necessarily all that interesting, but together it becomes something far greater than what it ever could have been, as if it was just a game about traveling or a game about attempting to meet the Emperor. It becomes greater because of everything, the way that everything works together. And while the board is a bit overwhelming at times, and there's a lot of actions and a ton of iconography, after a couple plays it becomes semi-intuitive. The game is not that difficult to understand, and it's one that rewards you for the more that you play it. The real kicker, the real thing that shines, is the fact that you are trading cards, and it reminds me a lot of my favorite small card game, Spoil Me Not. Injecting itself into this worker placement game, the standard worker placement fare, is this idea that you have to manipulate your hand of cards and use and figure out not only how you can get the best arrangement of cards, but what is going to be the worst thing that you can do for your opponent as well. Gùgōng is a game, one of those games that surprised me, one that I wasn't particularly interested in when I saw it, but the more that I heard about it, the more that I read about it, the more I realized this could be something special. And what I found is that that is absolutely true. Gùgōng is a fantastic game and one that I highly recommend and can't wait to play again.